Good evening, everyone. Good evening, members, officers, ladies and gentlemen, and for all of those who are watching remotely on the Council's YouTube channel. I say a very warm welcome to you all. So here we are on Monday, the 4th of July in the Council Chamber at Lichfield District Council, and we will have the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Now, I know that we have received apologies from Councillor Ray and also from Councillor Cross. Do we have any more, please? Okay, so those two apologies have been received from members. The second item on your agenda is declarations of interest. If I could ask any of you with a declaration of interest to please raise your hand to show. Okay, I'll take it then that no one has a declaration of interest which is relevant to this meeting. Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting, and that's the meeting which was held in this chamber on the 6th of June, 2022. You've all had an electronic copy circulated to you. If you're all happy that that represents a true and correct record of the meeting which took place on the 6th of June, would you please show?
Move it, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So, members, we now move on to the fourth item on the agenda, which, of course, is the planning applications. And so this evening, we just have the one, which is 21/0016/FULM. And this is the application at Burntwood, and this is the redundant site of the Bridge Cross Garage, Cannock Road, Chase Terrace, Burntwood. To take us through this, I have on my right-hand side, Senior Planning Officer, Mrs. Challoner, and you're going to take us through this, aren't you? Thank you very much. So you have it all on the screen, I can see. So if you'd like to cast your eyes towards the screen, members, and Mrs. Challoner will take us through this. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Tonight we're looking at the former site of Bridge Cross Garage in Burntwood, as the chair's just set out. We'll just take you through the site location plan there. That's the red line of the site. You've got Cannock Road going across the north, and then Water Street, just directly in front. Just to give you a bit more context, we've got Burntwood Town Centre and an existing town care home on the opposite side of the road. Sankey's Corner, I believe, is a bit of a local landmark. That's at the crossroads there. So tonight we're looking at a 3-storey, 78-bed care home with a community hub room and car parking and access. The application is before you this evening, as it was called in by Councillor Ennis, who raised objections to the scheme on the grounds of highways, probity, residential amenity, and conflict with both the Burntwood neighbourhood plan and the Lichfield local plan. And I believe Councillor Ennis is going to speak later on this evening. So the aerial view that you can see now shows it in a bit more context. There's site A and site B, which is referred to in the Burntwood neighbourhood plan, as in the report. So there's site A, and the care home site that we're looking at is just on the frontage of this site, fronting onto Cannock Road. You've also got to the rear, you've got McDonald's down here, an Aldi, Morrison's, and then the infamous Blue Hordens site, which you looked at an application for a few months ago where we refused a residential scheme. So close up of the site, so all the buildings have been demolished on site. It's a vacant site, as the chair's just pointed out. It's got some scrubland on it, but nothing really of note. The area to the rear is quite flat, and yeah, there's a lot more growth going on in the front of the site. You've also got Costa Coffee on this side of the site. So that's a relatively new building, which sits in front of a larger building, which is a gym and a charity shop at the back with a curry house, I believe. Got residential properties over here to the west, and immediately adjacent to the site is a church. Just take you through some of the photographs. This is a photograph looking up Cannock Road. There's the church in the foreground there, and the site will be in the middle here. Got the care home, which is on the opposite side of the road, which is 2-storey. So that's just shown on the foreground of photograph 1 and photograph 2 there. Another shot of the care home, and some of the design elements from tonight's scheme has been taken from this building. Photograph 4 is taken from Water Street, opposite the site. You can see that there's the original access to the site would be moved as part of the proposals, be moved over towards this junction here. So just in the corner there. More local photographs. We've got Burntwood Shopping Centre in the background there on the opposite side of the road. Photograph 6 is looking back towards into the site, again showing all the scrub that's kind of overgrown over the years, that the site has been vacant. It's been vacant for quite some time. Photograph 7 is from the site looking towards Burntwood Shopping Centre. And then photograph 8 is looking from the rear of the site back towards the sort of larger, wider allocation. And then lastly, photograph 9 is just a view of again, the back of the site. That's the back of the church there with the nearest houses beyond them. So turning to the proposal, as I said, you've got a 3-storey, 78-bed care home with a community hub room. There is a new access would be on the right-hand side or the eastern side of the site as we look at it, which would provide a road access in towards the rear of the site, but would also allow the road access to carry on through to the rear of the site. The care home is served by parking at the rear, which has been agreed Highways are happy with, and we've also got a space for a delivery and ambulance bay in connection with the use. We've got some landscaping on site that will be needed. So we've got all around the side this sort of enclosed garden areas for the residents, and there's also an enclosed garden area here. So we've got a landscaping condition so we can fully understand what landscaping is going in. The community hub, which is set out in the report, is an integral part of the scheme and would be secured by section 106. It's in this corner. It's got entrances onto the frontage. This area would be open along the frontage of Cannock Road. It's served by sort of WC facilities inside, and it also has access within the building, so the residents could also use the community hub. I should just point out as well that the site is within the Chasetown ward. The boundary with Chasetown and Chase Terrace is along Cannock Road. So you've got Chase Terrace to the north, Chasetown to the south, and we're in the Chasetown ward. So in terms of the elevations have been redesigned during the course of the application to add more interest to the front of the building. So we've got projecting single-storey parts with a little bit of balconies, gable, and materials are conditioned to ensure that we get high-quality materials. This is the eastern elevation, so this would effectively front the side of the gym and the Costa Coffee site and the road access going in. So we've got a sort of active frontage going along that side as well. Okay. This is a street scene which has been provided by the applicants just to show it in a bit more context. The church is a small building, and these are the houses the other side of the church. Got your access road that would bump into the back of the site just down there, and then there's Costa Coffee with the gym behind. Some more elevations. This is the back of the building. Again, there's gable features to break up the facades and so on. The layout drawings are pretty uniform. I think the main thing to point out is probably the community hub, which sits in this corner. As you can see, there's residential lounges and so on to community areas to for the use of the residents. I think this is quite helpful to point out. So this is policy B1 in the neighbourhood plan. This is the neighbourhood plan policies map, which sets out site A, which our site that we're looking at is just a small part of the front of that site. So you've got part A and part B, which are under policy B1 of the Burntwood neighbourhood plan are for mixed uses, or where mixed uses are supported. The local plan sets a vision for Burntwood to be a self-contained town with a larger and viable town centre. So that's what these policies are trying to achieve. So your recommendation this evening is for approval, subject to a section 106 with to secure biodiversity offsetting as the building accommodates quite a large part of the site. It wasn't feasible to get the biodiversity on site, so financial contribution is required so the council can deliver that off site. There's also a clause for the travel plan, and also to make sure that the community hub remains in perpetuity for the use of the community. In the supplementary paper that you've received this afternoon, you will see that there's also a CCG request being received as quite a late request for £37,375. This was a late request, and at this stage, officers would advise that there's more discussion required to ensure that this request meets the test for section 106, i.e. it's reasonable and it's necessary and related to the development, etc. And this area does remain in dispute over the amount. So it could be that actually no payment is necessary, or it could be that all of the payment is necessary. What we're asking is that this discussion is delegated to officers through the chair, basically. We've also, in the supplementary, you'll see we've received additional responses from 16 residents in Burntwood, including a local business owner, and they're addressed in the they're set out in the supplementary or summarised in the supplementary report, and they're also sort of acknowledged back in the original report. And then lastly, there's a further condition to be added for land remediation because the site was a former garage site. So that's all set out in the supplementary report. So the recommendation is to approve subject to all of the conditions and the section 106. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Challoner. Thank you. Yes, members, you've all received a copy of the supplementary report, either via ModGov, or you will have received a hard copy at this meeting as well, or you may have received an email as well. So I hope you've all had a chance to go through that. And just reiterating what was said by Mrs. Challoner, on the final page, page 5, I'll just read this little bit to you. Given the complexities of the issues, this is relevant to the CCG request. It is recommended that the healthcare financial contribution is delegated to officers for further review and conclusion. It goes on to say, in the event of any significant and/or fundamental amendments, this matter would be referred to the chair and vice chair of this planning committee to determine whether a referral back to planning committee is required. So I hope that that meets with your approval, but that is the wording in the supplementary that you have in front of you. So thank you very much for that. We do now have 2 speakers. Originally, we only had the applicant's agent, but I have accepted the reasoning which was presented to me by Councillor Ennis as the ward councillor. There appears to have been a slight glitch with the transmission of emails, etc., and there was a misunderstanding as well. So I have exercised my prerogative to allow the ward councillor to speak. So Councillor Ennis will speak in just a moment. 5 minutes is the time allowed, as is the time allowed, of course, for the other speaker, that's the applicant's agent. So Councillor Ennis, when you're ready, you have 5 minutes. With 30 seconds still to go, you will be notified as such, and at the end of 5 minutes, if you are still speaking, you will need to end your speech or your speaking immediately, please. So when you're ready, your time will start as soon as you begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just a little bit of context. Burnwood at the moment has care homes with 279 rooms. With 279 rooms in them. I took the time to go and speak to the largest of these. Each of them have both got empty rooms. One of them specifically 20 empty rooms of 68, which is a lot. It's also worth noting that this council, Burnwood Town Council, accepted planning in 2019, which has just started, for the closure of a nursing home which accommodated 25 patients to turn it into 10 flats. There's a couple of things I want to put context to the rationale of why we should accept this. At one point, they said there's a lack of retail and leisure demand within Burnwood because of such sites as the Cannock's new outlet. I'm afraid Ted Baker and Hugo Boss aren't knocking on Burnwood's door. I don't expect them to. But to put some context to it, within Burnwood, at the moment we have one shop up for rent, and that's under offer as it stands at the moment. So the retail in Burnwood is actually quite thriving. It's one of the best in the district. And just put a bit of context to that. On Zoopla, for example, Lichfield city centre at the moment has got 12 empty units, and Burnwood's got one. So I don't think we are struggling. I don't think a rationale to say that there is a lack of need for retail is fair. Also, there's a note in there that says that this development will not create a barrier. Actually, that's not quite true. If you look at the map that's up on the screen at the moment, the Sankey's Corner of Burnwood Town Centre is adjoined by that yellow marking. And if you put a care home there, it creates a barrier between what's called the old Olaf Johnson site. So again, it does create a barrier. It does create a divide to our town centre, and it doesn't allow for a true fully retail outlet if that is that comes to pass. When speaking to the care homes, I did speak to them about occupancy, but then also about the creation of 60 jobs. Creation of jobs is brilliant. But also what needs to take into account is actually at the moment, these industries are struggling. Both of the main two care homes are struggling for staff. They've got consistent staff requirements. Adding another site that will need 60 more staff will actually be detrimental to them. The one opposite was quite concerned that they wouldn't be able to survive because they'd have to get agency staff in. I did a quick check this morning on Indeed. At the moment, in the last 2 weeks, within 5 miles of Burnwood, there was 94 carers jobs. So adding more to that, how's that going to help anything? In the notes, you'll see that they've now put the community hub in there, which is supported by officers. It doesn't make this site a mixed development site. Changing 5% of the ground floor into a community hub doesn't make it mixed development. In the neighbourhood plan, it says this is allocated for town centre land, a mixed development site. In fact, this council accepted a mixed development site with retail, but that allowed for the whole of the ground floor to be shops, 33% of the site to be shops. That is a truly mixed development site, not 5% of a ground floor. It was noted that we've just had 16 residents come forward and put in their objections in the last week, partly because of some of this rationale that retail was struggling, that Burnwood doesn't need any more shops, or actually all of the evidence points in the opposite. We do. We need a town centre. We need a truly diverse area for us. And you'll see from the 16 responses, what they've all said is pretty much the same thing. This is not the plan for our town. This isn't what our town needs. We have very recently had a neighbourhood plan referendum, very recently, within the last few years. We went to our residents and we asked them for their views. We asked them what our town needed. We asked them what their opinions were. We took that away and we created a plan for our town. If we're then going to come to decisions like this and then change our minds, because this doesn't sit within the decisions made in that neighbourhood plan, it is not a mixed development site, it doesn't help our town centre, it's not retail, then it does question the fact of the strength of the neighbourhood plan and why we put so much effort in all that consultation in doing it in the first place. Thank you. Taking all those points into account, I have rushed through them. I put forward a proposal for refusal for this application. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Ennis, as the ward councillor. Thank you. We now move on then to the second speaker. This is the applicant's agent, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Paul Shuker. Mr. Shuker, the same apply to you as applied to Councillor Ennis. So you have 5 minutes. With 30 seconds still to go, you will be notified. Your time will start as soon as you start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and members tonight. I speak on behalf of the applicant Urban Villages Group. Delighted to be able to finally present this application this evening. This project started in early 2021, and the applicant has worked collaboratively with key officers, statutory consultees, including Staffordshire County Council, the ecology team, the economic and policy team, to get to this juncture tonight. This project will deliver a truly sustainable, centrally based care home facility on a recognised brownfield site in close proximity to the town centre. The applicant fully endorses the case officer's report and its balanced conclusion that it fully satisfies the principal planning policies in the local plan and the NPPF. Importantly, the committee report confirms that a care home is an acceptable use in principle by policy Burntwood 3. I would also address an identified need for specialist housing in accordance with core policy 6, contrary to obviously what the right honourable gentleman said earlier. Further, this is supported by the housing officer in recognition of an Asian population and the need for space, and the proposal is vital for those local residents who need that accommodation. The report confirms that there's no technical matters in dispute with statutory consultees, and we've worked with officers to get to a scheme that is wholly acceptable on all the grounds and subject to conditions. The applicant is well aware of the local neighbourhood plans and the preferred allocation of the wider site for retail, which has long aspirations since the 1990s. The applicant has provided significant marketing and planning evidence last year to confirm that there's no demand for significant retail and leisure floor space in Burntwood, which was first envisaged. The town centre policy does allow for the proposed development in this type of mix of use on this site. So again, the principle of proposals is acceptable. Further, the development of a small part of the mixed-use site will not prejudice the ability of the site to the back to come forward in the future for all the preferred uses. The scheme has been specifically designed to allow those links to that retail and leisure area to be safeguarded by that landowner, and that is the part of this proposal that's been put forward. Therefore, in summary, and consistent with the committee report, we can confirm that the redevelopment of the site does not conflict with local or national policy principle. It will repurpose a brownfield site in a sustainable location whilst ensuring that future mixed uses as required can be brought forward in the future when demand exists. The site has been vacant for a significant amount of time and has need for specialist housing in Burntwood and the borough more widely. The design, the massing, the positioning of the proposals is fully accepted by officers in terms of the street scene and the impact on the surrounding uses and area. Local amenities found to be acceptable is dealt with appropriately for condition. The proposal is fully acceptable on highways grounds in terms of the parking and the arrangements for ambulance and emergency vehicles, and again subject to a travel plan to improve sustainability. The impact on trees and retained trees is found to be acceptable, and the applicant has agreed with officers to provide an off-site contribution to biodiversity net gain because we weren't able to get it from landscaping, and we've committed to that. We are aware of the continued objection from Burntwood Town Council. The applicant has sought to meet and engage with Town Council, and they didn't engage with us at the time, which is disappointing. The Town Council have provided limited or no evidence on their unsubstantive claims to date, and that's why we wanted to talk to them about those issues, and we trust that limited weight can be attached to those concerns. As such, it is considered the applicant has submitted a suitable scheme which meets the requirements of the relevant development plan, policies, and subject to these conditions. The development would not have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding areas in the town centre. It would also provide important new population to the town centre, which will improve trade. It would also not prevent further development going forward within the wider allocation, nor have a detrimental impact on the amenity of neighbouring residents or prejudice highway safety. So to justify a refusal tonight. In light of this, we trust that the committee can agree with this conclusion and the proposals represent truly sustainable led regeneration of the Burntwood Town Centre and bring much needed specialist housing to the town. Thank you.
Mr. Shuker, thank you very much indeed for that. And also, of course, thank you very much to Councillor Ennis. And I do apologise, Councillor Ennis, that there was some confusion about your being allowed to speak, but I hope that we have resolved that satisfactorily. Thank you. First of the members who wishes to speak is Councillor Evans, please. Councillor Evans, thank you.
Thank you. As has been stated, we have a neighbourhood plan which was many years in the making, and the public, as was expected with such plans, they were very involved in this. And that committee were very clear that they wished Sankey's Corner to be identified for retail and leisure. I understand the constraints there are now on these developments, but to argue for a new care home on this site would obviously preclude that area from having what Brentwood needs in the future. Meetings have taken place between the County Council, the District Council and the Town Council to ensure that we get a more vibrant town centre. And everyone will know that what we have at the moment fails by a long way to meet the needs of the large population in both Burntwood and Hammerwich. This care home is not going to support the local community, as we have sufficient care homes in the area with vacant places, as Councillor Ennis has stated. It's a 3-storey overpowering development which will not fit well within the street scene due to its size and height. And in order to overcome objections, we see that a small community hub has been proposed, and it does say small. We don't really need one around there, and how this is going to work successfully within a building housing vulnerable people, I'm not sure. I do agree that a part residential aspect can be considered here, which is what we said, but a care home is not, surely, in most people's interpretation, a housing development. And how is a care home going to increase the attractiveness and market share of Sankey's Corner? And how will a balanced nighttime economy, as stated in the report, sit well around a care home? The Economic Development Officer quite rightly objects to this application and states that although the retail market remains unsettled, we need to consider long-term plans, and that's very important for an urban centre, not just retail, but other sectors. And that by building on this site, it limits opportunities for the centre to grow. And we must not just concentrate on the older demographic, but we need to think of the greater population in the future. On highways grounds, this is a very busy area of Burntwood, not necessarily conducive to a care home. And despite the suggestion of a travel plan, which will be monitored over 5 years and undertaken by the County Council, can we have an explanation of what this means? Because I haven't seen it before. I recognise the need to encourage alternative means of travel, but how will this work? And I do think it's important that we know how this would be managed and what would be the likely outcome. The report also mentions on page 14 an adjacent site on Milestone Way, which was refused in November for housing. No way is the Blue Hoardings site adjacent, and you can see that on there, that it is not adjacent to this site. And I understand and I know that we have to take each application on its own merit, but I do think that the plan at the Blue Hoardings was refused again because it was identified purely for housing and not for mixed use, as the neighbourhood plan has asked us to look for. And then when I look at this report, throughout words are used such as on balance, in principle, the proposal is considered to be acceptable and the proposals do not strictly conflict with the requirements of the planning policy. These words do actually indicate to me that there is some doubt. So in conclusion, I do believe that we should refuse this application, and I will put forward some grounds, but it may be that another speaker might wish to add to them, because I think it fails to respect the character, appearance, distinctiveness and identity of the surrounding area and would therefore have an adverse impact upon it. The land should be retained for the uses set out in the neighbourhood plan and the Lichfield local plan, with consideration given to the greater population in the future and their needs. I think that is also important. The area is within the Birtwood Town Centre boundary and should remain as such. I don't think a care home is acceptable in this vicinity due to the vulnerability of the residents, particularly if there is going to be an increased nighttime economy. And finally, on highways ground, it would add to the already congested area, despite a travel plan being suggested. So those are my suggestions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Councillor Birch, I think you wish to speak now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the avoidance of doubt regarding the blue hoarding site, that is the area marked as B at the bottom. The area marked as A, which is the adjacent area, is the Olaf Johnson site, effectively. So, as Councillor Evans said, the blue hoarding site is not adjacent to this development, as it says in the report. The application is, in my view, against the spirit of the neighbourhood plan, which allocates the land as part of the town centre development. The design of the building is large. It's out of character with anything else in the area. It's a 3-storey building. There's nothing like that anywhere nearby. And so it will be incongruous to the area. It will essentially form a physical barrier, a visual barrier as well, between the areas that are allocated as the town centre. So if it was going to be a coherent town centre in the future, it would be very difficult to say it's all part of the same area and attract shoppers and developers to the area when Sankey's Corner is separated by a large nursing home that's in the way. It's therefore not really desirable under the neighbourhood plan, even though the plan does not explicitly rule it out, because it's not helpful to future development of a town centre. Physically cutting the allocated town centre in two will make future development more problematic, as it will be impossible to get from one half of the town centre to the other easily without having to get down that access road. And I'm just a bit puzzled as to what the terms and conditions of that access road will be in terms of allowing access to the area A, if that was developed in the future. So will there be open access? If so, the level of traffic and people going down there could cause problems in the future if there is further development. I don't think this is sustainable development, as it makes the blue hoarding site and the Olaf Johnson site less desirable for mixed retail and leisure development. I dispute the claims that there is no interest in retail developments anymore. If that's the case, why do we see developments such as that on Eastern Avenue, where Lidl is, and why do nearby towns such as Hensford manage to have such a thriving town centre? Burntwood councillors will tell you just how often people in Burntwood contact us and complain to us about the poor shopping offer, leisure offer, cultural facilities, etc. that are there in Burntwood, and all of that town centre site allocation would allow that development. This report effectively seems to ignore that. I don't think anyone would like to see the area developed more than myself, if I'm honest. It's been just a derelict area of land for some time. But I do feel quite strongly it would be better to have the right development or no development at all, rather than one that splits the land in two and makes future hopes for a proper town centre highly unlikely. The Economic Development Officer has objected, as this does not form, in his words, a coherent long-term plan for the town centre. If anything, it seems to ride a coach and horses right through the hopes of any plan for future growth of a town centre. His words are, it is detrimental to future growth. It said it will provide employment opportunities. If anyone cares to speak to local care providers, as Councillor Ennis has, they will tell you just how hard they find it to get enough staff to keep their businesses running. That's proven by the number of vacancies for care home staff and also home care domiciliaries as well, to visit people in the community. So it won't really create more jobs, it will be creating more vacancies. Core Policy 8 needs a long-term approach. This will impact on any long-term change to give an improved offer to Burntwood residents for retail, leisure, office and cultural facilities as the inevitable population growth in the area occurs. As the population growth increases and we need more shops, we will have sterilised that area of land and made it more difficult for development. Local Plan Strategy Policy H1 states we will promote supported housing. There are already several such homes in Burntwood with empty beds, as again Councillor Ennis has pointed out, running at under capacity. Have we not already therefore met that need? Local plan strategy policy Burntwood 3, Burntwood economy relates to the regeneration of Burntwood town centre. This damages the chances of this by making the Blue Hoarding site and the Olaf Johnson site less desirable to developers in the future, as it separates them out permanently from Sankey's Corner, the current town centre. I dispute there being a number of vacant units at Sankey's Corner and Cannock Road. Again, Councillor Ennis has already beat me to it on that point. And the Cannock Chase outlet, again, as Councillor Ennis says, as a specific type of designer shop. I'm not sure how valid the suggestion is that we are in competition with that retail outlet. I don't believe the retail offer at Sankey's Corner will ever be in competition with a designer outlet of that nature. Side access to the rear of the site. Again, I'd just like some clarity around that side access and what that actually means. So it says it will give access to the rear of the site. Does that mean that there are conditions in future to allow that to be a public access road? That will then mean that if there are shops built on the Olaf Johnson site, that the traffic will get access via that route. Even so, if that is the case, it still forms a visual barrier, which is a significant issue when you've got a coherent plan for a town centre. I think on the basis of all of the points I've read, I was hoping, to be honest, because I do want to see the area developed, I was hoping for something that would actually appease my concerns, and I haven't. On the basis of that, I feel I have to second the proposal for refusal by Councillor Evans. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Birch, thank you very much indeed. I have Councillor Tapper now wishing to speak. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I think that interest in this area is something that is very clearly growing. And I think that if we are to deny that and say that this area isn't suitable for retail, it is in complete opposition of the facts as we see them. In the recent couple of years, we have observed businesses begin to come into the area. We've only in the last couple of months, we've seen a restaurant open up. If any of you have seen in Lichfield Live, we now have a Starbucks being opened up in the area. It's true that Burntwood has been a town in transition for a long time. I've never made any secret of that. And I think that has contributed to the long nadir of development in the area. But I think it's starting to come out of that nadir. I think it's beginning to find its feet again and beginning to figure out what kind of retail works for itself as a town. Now, just when I think that Burntwood is beginning to come into the day, just as we start to have proof that businesses are beginning to come back into this area and serve the local town, just as residents have been asking for years, is now the time to permit a development that runs not only against that, but actively harms its prospects. As we've said, I have doubts over the sustainability of a care home on that site, given there is questions over the sustainability of other care homes in the area. This is not a booming care home industry area. This is one that seems like it still has room to grow with what it already has. If whether some of the ones that are already there sufficiently serve the job demands and interests of the community. Adding another care home to this seems to only realistically muddy the situation. I think that it's not a sustainable development. And if we put that against the fact that it blocks, essentially, Site A, to a degree that I think is made very clear based on that drawing there, you create a very, very clear visual blockage, as was pointed out, and actively harms the prospects of further development on Site A and the interests that businesses will have in that area. Is this the fight we want to pick? Is this truly the best use of that site? Especially when it is so clearly pointed out in the neighbourhood plan as being segmented away for retail or mixed development. Now, I know that some people will turn to me on that and they'll say, but Councillor Tapper, it does meet the demands of mixed development. I think it meets it in the worst possible way. It meets it in a technically sense. Now, yes, technically it is mixed development, but is it truly mixed development? And I don't believe that right now we should be making decisions based on technically, we should be making it based on what's right. And the spirit of the local plan, as was pointed out, was that this area would be used for retail development or for mixed development that served the interests of the development of a town centre. This shows, in my opinion, no signs or indications of serving the interests of a town centre. And most importantly, 5% is not adequate use of the public, in my opinion, for it to realistically serve the interests of a community. It reeks of, we'll put the bare minimum of community aspect into it so that it meets the demands of a mixed development. Then we can have our care home, and then we can put we still meet the technical demands of the local plan. Now, further to that, even being intimately familiar with this area, just the same as Councillor Ennis's, this road I do not feel is sufficient to have a care home placed on it. I have driven down it at rush hour and it's dangerous. It is not an area where I would think an assisted living area should be placed next to, especially one which may require access by the emergency services. An emergency services vehicle trying to get down the Cannock Road at peak rush hour time is going to have an incredibly hard time of it, especially given that a lot of that immediate area has bollards stopping drivers from being able to pull over sufficiently to give space. You may end up with a very realistic situation of a blockage that cannot be removed without drivers driving through wooden bollards. Now, as we all know, that's not going to happen. So, to steal a phrase from the report that were given, on balance, I don't feel that this development is suitable for the position that the town finds itself in right now. And the choice that's between this committee right now is maintaining the spirit of the local plan and Burntwood development, or compromising it.
Councillor Tapper, thank you very much indeed. Any other? Councillor Anketel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Is this working? Is this working? Not very well, I don't. Right, so
oh, okay. It's working now. Right, okay, then. I thought I might have been in a difficult position this evening, but I find now that I'm in agreement with Councillor Evans, Councillor Burt, and Councillor Tapper. I saw straight away that this development was against the local development plan. But I had assumed that in Burntwood, as in Lichfield, there'd be lots of retail outlets closing down or staying closed for a very long time, like the old Debenhams, and before that, the old TJ Hughes, and before that, something else, I think. And I was struck reading through the report by the Economic Development Officer's report, which Councillor Evans and Councillor Birch has highlighted, and saying that this development over there would inhibit further development around neighbouring areas. So they've put it much more eloquent than I have, but I highlight what they were saying and what the development officer says. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anketel. Any other members, please, before I bring in Mrs. Challoner to address some of those points? Okay, Councillor Baker, please. Are you okay with this? If we have all the comments and then you perhaps address them as one. Thank you very much. Councillor Baker, the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
I think a lot of the comments before overlap each other anyway, so we need to convert them into questions. I'm not sure if this is a planning question or not, but could you remind us why the development on B was turned down? I have a feeling it was because it was inappropriate development for the area, and also the design, let's be frank, was pretty horrible. I can't think of any other way of putting it. So I think we need to be aware of that situation. I think it might be helpful if you went back to the Google Earth picture, and then we could see how the access road could or couldn't work, because obviously that will impact on the future, whatever development goes ahead or doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker. Mrs. Challoner, you've got quite a lot to go at there, haven't you, really?
I'll try and keep up with it.
Thank you.
If I take Councillor Baker's first. The area B, the Blue Horden site, was refused. I think it was November, one of the November committees. We had 2 committees last November, and it was refused on a number of grounds. One of them was a principle, and that it was just 100% covering the site with houses. And then there was also design and highways impacts associated with that development. So we refused it for them reasons as well. But in principle, we considered that it was against the objectives of the local and the neighbourhood plan, because it completely took out all of the B site, the Blue Horden site, and there would be no residential retail or leisure or any mixed use town centre use could come forward, because the whole site would be covered in houses effectively. In contrast to this application, it is an on balance recommendation. This site only forms a small part of the A of part A. The slide in front of us just shows the side access road. Now this has been subject to quite a lot of discussions with highways to make sure that it would also, although it's a private access road, it would not be adopted by Staffs County Council. It would be sufficient to serve a larger development on the rear of the site, which I'll just back to the overall aerial view, which is that kind of a large square in between McDonald's and the back of the built form on Cannock Road. I think the question was asked about the travel plan. That was Councillor Evans. Now, the travel plan would need to be put forward by condition as part of condition 13, and it's the County Highways Authority that not only agree that but also manage it and monitor it. So in terms of the applicant would be required to put forward a plan that tries to increase sustainability and how you would do that, and there's all sorts of different ways that you can do that, but again they have the overriding say on that. And it is seen as a sustainable location. It's well served by public transport in the town centre, but it's not just a case of not just using cars, using other methods of transport and how that's promoted. And the travel plan monitoring fee is to make sure that that's adhered to. If I just get down, yes, I did put in the report the adjacent site. I meant adjacent in terms of A and B, but I get what you mean, that there is obviously Morrison's and Aldi in between the site, but overall it's within the town centre boundary, which covers Sankey's Corner as well. I think, yeah, I've just set out that the side access would remain private. I think that was raised by Councillor Birch and Councillor Tapper. And I think I would just reiterate, yes, it is an on-balance recommendation. We have explored getting retail into the development. However, in terms of retail, what's come forward is that it's larger scale retail is more popular, and we couldn't fit that into this small site along with the care home. Off the back of that, we've then gone down the route of exploring providing a community hub to serve Burntwood. I think that covers everything, but if anybody's got any questions.
Councillor Baker, please. Thank you, Mrs. Shannon.
Thank you. I'm just looking at that map again. So if you compare it to the map in our report, which looks like there's 2 sites, one will be filled potentially with a care home, and then the rest has got nothing. So where's the McDonald's on that one? I'm trying to work out the juxtaposition between A and B on what's in between the 2 allocations. Yeah, if you can remember which shop's what.
I'll try. So this doesn't show the actual site itself, but it's basically this square here, and includes a road through that we just looked at, that private road. Now down here is McDonald's.
Yeah, that's McDonald's. Yeah.
And then off the little island, the other side of the island is Aldi, which kind of appears on Morrison's car park. So you've got Morrison's, Aldi, then McDonald's. Aldi's.
The Aldi's up on the other side, on the right.
Yeah.
rising out across the side of the house.
Oh, sorry. So that's
That's
the
a
petrol
station.
station, or, sorry.
Sorry, can I ask what's in the rest of site A?
Site A is just flat, there's nothing,
That's part of the.
It's part of the allocation.
In the future.
So it was subject, I should also say, was pointed out in the report, to two previous planning approvals, which I think has been touched on
as well. And they lapsed in January of this year. So the first one was for a 3-story mixed-use development, which included A1, A3, A5, so it's town centre uses, D1, and then 14 two-bedroom apartments. That was outlined, and that was approved in 2018. And that's now lapsed. Nothing come forward out of that. And then at a similar time, we also approved there was retail units, I think it was quite large units in the back of A and 3 smaller units. And again, that's lapsed as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Temple, I'll come to you in just a moment, thank you. There is concern about the access, I think, of the rear of the site, isn't there, Mr. Chairman, in terms of this building will restrict in some way access to the rear of the site. Are we happy that that access is adequate? Obviously, the point was made about emergency vehicles as well. So can you just tell me what width of access remains were this to be built, please? Do we know that?
I don't know the exact measurements, but I know we've had a lot of to and fro with the Highways Authority to make sure that that access road would serve the site at the back.
Okay.
And what they use is manual for streets, which sets out that I think the only thing it failed slightly on, is a footpath would be put in on this side of the building. And I don't know if you can see it, but part of the building juts out a little bit, and that is where the footpath gets reduced to less than 2 metres. But the remainder of the footpath is 2 metres wide, which is in line with manual for streets and the roadway.
Okay.
is adequate.
So obviously it passes the test, doesn't it, in terms of creating access for the backland site?
Yeah, that was
here?
quite important. We
Absolutely.
wanted that.
Absolutely. I mean, as people have said, you wouldn't want it to compromise the developability of the rear site. Thank you. Now, the access road we've just touched on, but the highway itself, county highways don't appear to have any major concerns with this, do they? I know that 1 or 2 of the local members have suggested that they feel as though the feeder road to this site is inadequate, although having said that, county highways would not necessarily back up that view. Now, of course, don't forget that this is a major application as well, and we would have to make sure that were it to be refused, then we have got strong grounds for supporting that. Councillor Tapper, you wish to speak, don't you? Please.
Yes, Chair. In many respects, you took the first question straight out of my mouth. I was going to ask what the width of the road was. My second question was going to be, it's been said that this will be the access road for the rear. Will this be the only access road to any development that took place behind it? Because the image that's building in my head is that this one single road may end up with quite some volume if there was a development behind, which, given its potentially life-saving importance, seems relatively, it seems quite important that we make sure that's all right. So is that the only access to the rear?
Well, at the moment it is, but any development, you're not looking at the development on the back of the site. If it's development,
Is there options?
there's an option for other accesses, and that would be looked at that point. So if we had a development come forward for large retail units at the back, what we're saying is this isn't the only access, but we're given an access. There's also the option at the bottom of the site, I believe, of a mini roundabout. So if we're not looking at this site tonight,
I understand that this seems to be.
What we're doing is not stifling that.
I think this, by definition, seems to be stifling it, because we're having one access road which is of vital importance, and that roundabout right there is a small one that already has massive pile-ups every time there's a wait for fuel. Now, what this is all suggesting to me over this entire report is that if this care home does go in, site A will become incredibly unsuitable for any further development based on the knowledge of the local roads. Now, yeah, I understand that highways may not take my view, and that's why I don't think we've led with highways disputes. Highways will think what highways will think. But in the business sense, I feel that those two options aren't sufficient to make this development in the interests of the local area.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Tapper. Any other members, please? Okay, Councillor Powell. Councillor Powell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just an observation, and that is, if we're going to do neighbourhood plans, which we do, they take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of people's inputs. We then sit down and ignore what the local people want, then why are we bothering to do a neighbourhood plan? So take it from there.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Powell. Do we have any other speakers at all, please? Councillor Checkland, thank you.
Thank you. There's obviously very strong feeling in the room.
Try again. Obviously very strong feelings in the room. As we dictated, came here with an open mind. The concept of a care home I'm in favour of, because 78-bed care home means you've just freed up 50 to 60 houses in the local area, which means you then don't have to build 50 to 60 houses because the people have moved into the care home and those houses are now free. I'm interested in how long the land's been vacant. And I appreciate that what's been said, it's been vacant for some time, but if we're going to use arguments like that, we should have built on the Birmingham Road South site by now with whatever we'd had put in front of us. It's a tricky one. The feeling that is coming across to me is coming from those people who are responsible for the neighbourhood plan in the area that they represent and they know better. So I'm erring on the side of voting against at this point, but I just wanted to raise those.
Thank you very much. Well, we're going to go to the vote very soon. I think we're going to need reasons. Mrs. Billings, did you want to just come in at this point, please? I think it's probably appropriate that you just say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, obviously, we put forward 4 reasons for refusal as I identified it. 1 relating to fails to respect the character and appearance of the surrounding area. The 2nd seems to refer to the use of the site and that it should remain a town centre mixed use. The 3rd one, that the site is not suitable for a care home. And the 4th relates to highway grounds. I'd just like to comment in particular about the latter 2. In terms of highway grounds and impact on congestion, members need to be aware, of course, that the site is in the town centre. So there will be a use that comes forward on this site that will cause further traffic movement. So I would just, raise the point that the Highways Authority don't have a problem with the development of this site. You need to be careful that you're not stifling, a word that's been used this evening, you're not stifling any other use on this site by saying that by developing it, it will cause problems in the area about congestion and movement of traffic. So I would be cautious about that reason for refusal. Would be my advice, my professional advice to you this evening. In terms of not suitable for a care use, again, it is the policies that are put forward talk about mixed use development within the site. So in terms of suitability of use, again, you've got to be cautious on how you're defining what is and what isn't suitable in terms of planning. Residential is acceptable on this site. A CT use is a form of residential use. It is a care facility, however. And the policy does refer about mixed uses. So to say the use in itself is not suitable, again, I would err with caution on that. But certainly in terms of the other reasons for refusal, in terms of sustainability of defending appeal, obviously it's subjective in terms of impact on character and appearance. And use of the site in terms of the policy and what that says about retail and further mixed use developments, then they seem more appropriate in that respect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Billings. And the legal officer now, Stuart Evans, wishes to come in. Thank you.
Chair, I just particularly wanted to reinforce what Mr. Billings actually said about highway guidance.
Please, Stuart, thank you.
I just wanted to reinforce what Mrs. Billings has said about the highway grounds. Those particularly concern me. I think you'll see from the report that Staffordshire Highways have no objection to this particular development. They are the Highways Authority. And I would counsel against using this as a reason for refusal, because clearly the Highways Authority would not be there to actually defend that reason for refusal. And as a consequence, a part cost application may follow in relation to such a reason for refusal, if not properly defended by the Highways Authority.
Thank you very much there to Stuart Evans, the legal officer. There you are, members, then you've heard that. So you've heard the reasons which are deemed to be acceptable, possibly for refusal. You've also heard the ones which aren't. Highways, we have the statutory authority, County Council Highways. They do not have a problem. So if we were to cite highways as an issue here for refusal, they would not be prepared to back us up if it went to an appeal. So you've had the proposal for refusal, and that was by Councillor Evans. You've also had that seconded by Councillor Birch. You've heard all the arguments, you've heard the two speakers, members. I wonder whether you'd please be good enough to raise your hands then if you are in agreement with the proposal for refusal. So if you are wishing to refuse this, would you please raise your hand there? Thank you. So that's 7 in favour of refusal. Those against refusal, please. Thank you. That's 3. So, members, you have determined that we should refuse that application by a vote of 7 to 3. And the reasons, again, I wonder whether, Mrs. Billings, you could just perhaps enunciate those reasons, please. The ones that I know you cautioned against the last 2, but the first 2, I think, were on sustainability grounds and also the impact on the character and appearance of the local area. Is that correct?
The ones that I noted that was referred to by Councillor Evans, one was that it fails to respect the character and appearance of the surrounding area. Number 2 was to do with the use of the site and that it should remain in accordance with the local plan allocation in terms of town centre use. Number 3 was to do with the site not being suitable for a care home. And number 4 related to highway grounds and concern over that it would cause further congestion in the local area.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillor Birch, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is it worth referring to core policy 8, stating around the development proposals for retail, leisure, office and cultural facilities will be focused within the commercial centres? I don't believe that this adds to that at all. I think it's against that core policy. Also, the local plan strategy policy for Birkwood 3, Birkwood Economy, supports the regeneration of Birkwood Town Centre, with the town being promoted as an area of increased and more diverse economy. I believe, again, it's against that in terms of the sustainability.
I think those reasons needed to have been given prior to the vote. Would that be correct?
That's correct, Chair. The 4 reasons that have been voted on are those that I've set out. But of course, in making reference to those reasons for refusal, we will make reference to relevant policies. But we can't add in further matters.
Not subsequent to the vote having been taken, no. No. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank Mrs. Billings and also Stuart Evans, the legal officer, and I think the legal officer wishes to come back. Is that correct, Stuart? Oh, right, okay. Councillor Birch, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wasn't proposing that they are added to the list of reasons. I was supposing that they are used to illustrate.
Incorporated within. Thank you very much. Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. Was just seeking clarification to make sure that we had that right. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Members, thank you very much for your deliberations and for your decision there. So that application there, which is at Burntwood, has been refused, as I say, by a vote of 7-3. That concludes the meeting here. I'd like to thank all the members for taking part. I'd also like to thank all the officers for their participation this evening as well, the speakers also, and I would like to say thank you to all of those who've been watching this planning committee meeting remotely. I bid you all a good night.